Hi, empaths. Welcome back to my safe space and the journey through the tarot. This week, we're going to talk about our experience with the Empress, the Empress card, right? What a great week. And we're going to be introducing the Emperor. So we learned about the history of the Emperor last week because they're counterparts. They're clearly a married couple. So the history's kind of intertwined there. So check out the Empress week, last week, the High Priestess week, where we also introduced the Empress. If you're interested in more history around the Emperor, that's where we got into that. This whole journey is inspired by Dirty and Divine by Alice B. Grist, a transformative journey through tarot. She spent a day with each card. I decided on a week. Day wasn't enough time for me to really work with those archetypes. And the history and symbolism and even divination, I'm getting much of that information from this book by one of my tarot teachers, Robert Empress, called The Tarot, History, Symbolism, and Divination. And we're working with the Waite-Smith symbolism of the Rider Tarot deck. So if you want to pick up any of these items, my Amazon store will be linked in the description. And that does help me out financially, just to be transparent. Hey, if we're getting into the Empress and then through the Emperor week, we're talking about that, right? So let's get into it. So this week was crazy. I feel like working with the Empress was truly helpful for me because it is part of my shadow. The High Priestess is more something I clearly identify with. And I think the Empress is something that is a learning curve for me to really get in touch with, particularly with a history of spiritual bypassing and just checking on the alignment of the shot, particularly with my history in Catholicism and that history of spiritual bypassing. The Empress is very helpful to me, learning to really care for myself in the physical plane. And I think that's true of many empaths. I think that's our experience. But this week, my best friend let me know that while he was watching last week's video where we were introducing the Empress and sending out the intention of drawing her in, right, with the singing bowl, a theater company that had passed him up for a role reached out to him to offer him a job. He had since been cast in a show with a more convenient schedule and location that also paid more. He looked forward to turning it down and even came up with the phrase, "that don't impress me much," with Empress instead of Impress. I laughed so hard. I was like, I can't wait to share that. So if something is in alignment with your Empress archetype, that don't impress me much. I thought that was really funny. So he's looking forward to turning down this gig that he wasn't acknowledged for in the first place. They passed him over for casting. And it was really an act of the divine because he got a better gig, right? And so he was excited to turn that down. And last week we learned that the Empress can symbolize artistic success. That came up a lot this week. I've been feeling more centered, solid, stable, and secure. And life has sort of taken a slower pace, which I feel like can happen when you get into your sensual energy, right? Things slow down. You get more present. I feel more capable and aware of my body's physical needs, and am able to experience pleasure more with far less guilt. I even scheduled an appointment with a gynecologist to care for my physical body and up my self-care game, despite my history of being seemingly untreatable or undiagnosable, or I have been mishandled by Western medical practitioners a lot. But I'm facing my fears with a new perspective because I now really trust myself to have my back no matter what happens, and to know myself and my body, much more deeply. So I can trust in the process more because I trust myself more. And I think that wanting to care for myself, right? Wanting to care for my physical expression is linked to the Empress. An additional synchronicity to this was when I went to watch a YouTube video from the School of Greatness by Lewis Howes, but it wouldn't load on my Chromecast. So instead of forcing it, I went, like, I accepted, right? I was in a state of allowing. So I went to an older one with Gabby Bernstein, and in it she talks about finally accepting the supportive medication for her postpartum anxiety after trying to treat it with her spiritual tools, which allowed her to do even deeper work by looking at parts of herself that she was once too anxious to. So she was actually seeing, I think, a therapist who encouraged her to maybe just give it a try. And I can really relate to that because, you know, as a spiritual healer myself and someone who considers food medicine, right, and supplementation and natural products, herbs, essential oils, I do have this aversion to medication, and part of me feels like out of alignment with that. But I'm finally more open to just at least seeing my options and trusting other people who have an authority or an expertise, and not just feeling like I know everything and that I've, you know, so interested in getting an informed opinion. I did my research on who I'm going to go see and everything too. I was like, only the best for the Empress archetype, right? An additional synchronicity to this, oh, I already said that. So the night before, one of my good friends called me, who is very much the Empress embodied. I admire her. I look up to her. I'm following a similar path as her. We hadn't talked in a while, and I even said to her, of course you called me tonight. I just started working with the Empress. We don't talk on the phone that often. We message back and forth a lot. And the night I did the Empress, she called me out of the blue, and we always kind of say, are you free this day? Right? We schedule it in. She just felt like called to just call out of the blue without a plan. And that's so unlike us. We usually we really adhere to the schedule. Like, we are both on a schedule. So, that's usually how we operate. But this time she just felt compelled, to call out of the blue. So I was like, of course, right? I'm working with the Empress and here you are. And during that phone call, we talked about many things, business, personal, and otherwise. And she brought up, as Gabby Bernstein did, that she was accepting the help of medication as a tool to manage anxiety, where natural approaches hadn't worked. She admitted that it's really helping. And I believe this is coming up for me because I have assumed that the natural approach is the best approach always. So it's allowing me to be open, right? And hearing these women's stories helps me feel aligned in going to the doctor, because that's also something I have a lot of resistance to. I've gone to see holistic practitioners and healers, right? Alternative solutions. This applies to the Empress because this message was brought to me by two powerful women, and I felt positively challenged to nurture myself by making sure my health is optimized. And I really feel like the Empress is about caring for your body, caring for your sensual needs, and optimizing that by having stellar health, right? And so I stepped up. This is something that has been a long time coming too, because this same friend always encouraged me. She encouraged me a long time ago to go to the doctor and just make sure everything's okay. Like, you know, and I don't know, I've always had sort of more affinity with holistic practitioners and alternative therapy. And that can really add up to financially. And I want to take better care of my finances as well as the Empress. So, as that archetype comes in, right, just being more mindful there. So making use of my insurance, right? That doesn't cover much alternative medicine. Oh, and then interestingly, an Instagram friend, someone I've only talked to on Instagram, messaged me and said after we talked about the Empress, I guess we commented back and forth or something like that. She was shuffling and playing with her tarot deck and the Empress card flew out. She was like, wow. So that was another synchronicity. And then back to, I watch like the video version of podcasts and stuff in the background while I'm doing other work and stuff. Sometimes that just helps me concentrate more than like silence and the sounds of the room. So I had that on, and after the Gabby Bernstein interview was over, and I was doing online work, another podcast auto-played with a man, Lewis Howes, called The Caring Comedian. I guess this man, who I don't remember his name, I'll have to look back in my history, but he started out as a comedian and got into spiritual healing and on a spiritual path. He talked about loving all aspects of self unconditionally and not putting parameters around purpose, freedom, love, etc. You can achieve those states by being willing to experience the opposite and owning that you are freedom, love, purpose, whatever else, right? You are those things already. A quote from him: the highest asset we have is our connection to ourselves. He made the point that wealthy people go to Buddhist monks, but the opposite never happens. Buddhist monks don't go and ask wealthy people how they're doing it. So his point, I guess, was that spiritual fulfillment is the ultimate fulfillment, and it creates less of this compulsion and need to accumulate, right? Accumulate goods and wealth, right, in the material world. That becomes imbalance when we're fulfilled spiritually, and put some of these thoughts and beliefs in check, right, and deconstruct a lot of this stuff that makes us feel compelled and creates compulsion around consumerism, right, and that something outside of us will fulfill us. So his point was, it's already within. A beautiful message to receive, right, at any time, to be reminded of that. Something I really liked was, I also quote him as saying, "Debt, I love you." Loving it gives you nothing to overcome. It's not something to overcome. And he also mentioned, don't get excited about money, get excited about you. You earned every dollar that's ever come in. Focus on what you are, not what money will bring you. Money is magnetized to passionate people. So that was really interesting and exciting. And I loved that because that idea that things come in and are magnetized is very much the Empress, right? That feminine empowerment. I mean, that is what the feminine is in her power is all about, is aligning to things and magnetizing them in. That's feminine essence. Whenever I am preparing to film, I always anticipate people reaching out to me. I have to discern what's the best use of that energy that's accumulating, right? Because when you're preparing to execute on a project, a creative project or any project, right? That preparation, where you think, I'm going to do it at this time, the energy starts to accumulate, right? And people can read that. So if the person requesting my attention is an energy or time waster or crazy maker, Julia Cameron has taught me to put up boundaries around my time and energy fiercely. Otherwise, my creative projects will be sabotaged. I've had many opportunities this week to really look at that and be better with boundaries for my physical well-being as well. It's always the case. And Julia Cameron talks about this in The Artist's Way, right? I did the Artist's Way journey on this channel. If you want to go through that with somebody, I filmed my journey there. vlogged my journey there. But yeah, she talks about how when you're preparing to do any kind of creative work and that energy starts to accumulate, you will attract in people who want some of that, right? It just becomes this signal, I guess, and people can sense that. And it's never failed. Every day I intend to film or prepare, right? Prepare for the next video. I'm always distracted by phone calls. It's really interesting. This week, or today in particular, funny, like we're making the transition from Empress to Emperor. I remember waking up this morning and thinking, I feel really lonely. Like it's such a lonely feeling. And then I looked at my phone and a good friend had called. I'll talk about that phone call later. And I thought maybe he left a message. So I checked my voicemail and then a friend had left a message. Another friend had left a message who is an Empress. And she's the one I talked about earlier. So I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. I have so many people I can count on and talk to and that are givers as well, right? That aren't just calling to take from me. So that actually nourished me. That gave me more vitality and made me really happy to hear their voices. So, and that was interesting because I experienced it as a manifestation or an answer to, I feel lonely. I would like some contact or connection with somebody. And there was the answered prayer, right? Just almost immediately. It was very crazy. And then I was watching Teal Swan. I find her very interesting. I love her teachings. And I love to consider her outlook on things. And she was talking about how, and this is very much something I talk about too. It was a great reminder that loneliness is a state of inner separation, fragmentation, right? So we're actually looking for integration internally when we feel that lonely feeling. And I could definitely see that to be true. But sometimes it is just sort of like, I'm an interdependent being and I would like some connection. Please, now, thank you. And it just it was answered, right? So it made me feel like, oh, that's something I have looked at and healed so that it could come in, right? Because sometimes we might think that's what we want, but we're not a resonant match to it because we have inner separation, right? Inner fragmentation. So we're not a match for connection externally. So I felt like that was a sign that because it was manifested so effortlessly, it was a sign that I was in emotional resonance with it. And I just had this feeling of, oh, I would like some connection today. And it wasn't like this throbbing feeling of loneliness, this prolonged suffering. It was more just like, I would like connection. I would like to speak with somebody today. And it was made manifest. I thought that was, and it was instantaneous. That was amazing to me. Great sign. I also had the guidance this week to do a new series of videos on this channel called Empath Empowerment. And it's going to be informative videos. This guidance came through my father, who is probably a combination of Emperor, Empress energy. Maybe more Emperor. No, he's a good combo, but he wants to support and help me in empowering me in, creating this business. It's a dream of mine, right? And that's something he can be on board with, and more so than the art than the arts. He doesn't really understand that aspect of me, but building a business is something he can get on board with. And so he was watching other YouTubers who have a lot of views, and he noticed a few that were like a list of signs you're an empath or whatever. And I was thinking, I got a little jealous, and I was like, he watched that to the end. Is it because this person was a man? Which is interesting because I watched another Teal Swan video and she talked about resonance and how resonance doesn't always mean something is true just because it resonates. It just means that is your view of the world, and it's ringing true for you, but it doesn't mean it's objective truth. It just means, like the fact that I felt like, is my dad listening to this person because this person's a man and I'm a woman? And that could just be something that I've experienced so much that it's something I now project onto other experiences, when maybe that's not the case. And then he did confirm to me, like, well, if it makes you feel any better, because I brought it up to him, I was like, I was a little jealous. I was thinking, are you watching that because that's a man? And like, I could have told you that, Liz, too. And he's like, no, if it makes you feel any better, I would have watched the video if it was a woman too. I wasn't, thinking, oh, here's a man, so I'll listen to this guy. So I found it interesting that I was willing to talk about that, right, and bring it up. And he was able to sort of say, no, that's actually not what happened. So I was able to kind of put that belief in check, that I can always use that as an excuse to sabotage myself, right? But yeah, so he helped me create that to come up with the idea for the new series. And then I already filmed a few videos. The first one was What is an Empath? And that's on this channel. So check that out. They're longer, they're shorter, more digestible videos. So they're shorter in length, just checking on the time. So they're shorter in length, more digestible, and just information to empower the empath, right? To get to know ourselves, discover our true essence, and empower ourselves, right? With that information and knowledge. So I'm excited about that, of having a new series. And I think that, what I'm here to offer is really coming into fruition. So that's a great feeling. And like I just said, I've been better at speaking up and communicating my thoughts and needs with others, even when it's in disagreement or conflict, right? Because I feel that's progress, because I have easier access to my inner high priestess. I just go there much more easily, expecting telepathy to be understood, right? Non-spoken communication, non-verbal communication with that high priestess. But I'm breaking down the constructs of belief that having needs and boundaries is life-threateningly detrimental. Because that's what happens when love is taken away for any reason as children, right? It becomes an issue of survival. Anytime a child is pushed away, that's another Teal Swan video that came up this week. Interesting. Or even today, I think I watched it. She was talking about somatically, if we're not given approval for something, or like you're being too loud, it's pushing behavior. And for a child, that can feel life-threatening, because our survival is linked to the love of adults, right? The attention and approval of adults. So it can feel life-threatening. And that's really interesting, because this week in the Business Alchemy program, we talked about the archetypes of survival. And we were working with those. And even more synchronously, one of the archetypes of survival, the saboteur, came up in one of the readings I did. I filmed a couple of days ago. I can't remember if it's one I will post on this coming Tuesday or next. But that archetype came up in one of the readings. The saboteur is an archetype of survival. So that's interesting that came up. I was like, that is so synchronous. So like everything's aligning. This week with the Empress has also enforced and supported better attention to foods and beverages that are healing and friendly to my system, helping me experience more vitality and buoyancy of spirit, despite some lingering health issues that I still am managing. So taking better care of my body, but still honoring the sensual pleasure, right? So I found that if I was craving something sweet, dates are like nature's sugar, right? So I could have 2 to 3 dates and feel completely satiated. My heater's kicking in, sorry. Even like natural, really crisp apple cider with no added sugar can be really satiating, just a little bit. Like so much better than like a diet soda, for example, right? Because I can, like, if that's here, I can drink that in like one sitting. But with apple cider, I just need a little bit to feel satiated. So finding things like that are alternatives and using the scale to determine whether or not something's friendly for me. If the next day I've gained weight, it's not a friendly food for me. My system's just really sensitive like that. Like it'll make me store water, right? Inflammation will be triggered. So when you have a sensitive system, and empaths do, right? Oftentimes we're highly sensitive to any stimuli, including foods. And because of that, my sensitive system, I have to really use things like the scale as tools to notice the difference, right? Sometimes I can just feel it, but other times I'm not quite as in tune. So I use that as a tool, not to judge myself, because I used to do that, right? Not to get on the scale and be like, oh my God. But to just see, did it go up? Did it go down? And what did I eat or drink that might have contributed to that? And just really nailing this, nailing nutrition and nourishing myself optimally. And a couple of friends I hadn't spoken to for a long time contacted me, who I consider Empresses this week. I'm in one conversation, the person I was talking to complained about not feeling well after eating leftover Halloween treats. I turned it around to everyone. I turned that idea around to everyone wants sweet treats every now and again. So it wasn't the urge or longing that was bad. It's just the low quality of the indulgence that created the issue. So much like I was just saying, like it just was the quality of the indulgence. It had nothing to do with the urge. The urge wasn't bad, right? The Empress wants sensual pleasures. And so I said to her, too bad you have the refined needs of an Empress. Guess you'll have to manifest your empire to be able to afford only the highest quality going forward. And she smiled and was like, working on it. And that brought clarity to me too. When I was able to turn that around for her, it turned around for me too. It was like, and it helped me see that I was doing that. But my urge for sensual pleasure is not bad. But do I have to go to a Snickers, right? No. Do I have to go to a Reese's peanut butter? No. Like you can get dates and it's just like so satiating, right? And then you don't have the inflammatory response. You don't have the addictive patterning, right? It's like when it's friendly for you, it doesn't become this compulsion to use it. It's nourishing, it's satiating. So finding those things for me that are just so pleasurable to my taste buds, particularly now that we're moving into another season here, the things that satiated me in the summer don't always apply. So getting really clear about that for myself. And then the other friend, funny enough, was indulging in candy bars. we were chatting too. So sensual pleasure of the Empress, right? We reflected on our growth and spiritual process. We also bonded in our similar visions and goals of one day being in LA, because she just had her phone number changed to a California number. And when I called her, I was like, are you in California now? And she was like, no. And I was like, oh, is that a vision of yours? She's like, yeah, how'd you know? And I was like, I'm similarly putting my, manifestation power over there. I have this dream and this vision of being there one day. And she's like, oh my gosh, well, we should go there together. We could be roommates. I'm like, that could actually be a really good match, actually. And she was really taking pride in this new phone number. So we bonded over that. And then funny enough, I'll be traveling to LA at the end of this month during my birthday, and we'll hopefully get to see another friend of mine who is also very much an Empress in her life. So she lives in LA. So I'm excited about that trip, being there for my birthday, because I have a few astrologer friends who talk about traveling on your birthday to reset your birth chart. And I did that once before, and I don't know that I saw a lot of change, but it's interesting to experiment with that sometimes. I'm always traveling on my birthday, though, it seems, because it's right near Thanksgiving. And that's generally when my family takes vacations together. And then my best friend and I were chatting a lot this week about manifestation. And this is a process I've invested a lot of study time, and in true empath fashion, in true empath form, I'm excellent at supporting other people in the process and helping them navigate, right? But I sometimes find myself growing impatient and resentful as I wait for the realization and actualization. I usually then get really intense lessons from the universe about gratitude and attitude adjustment. But my best friend and I, we send audio messages back and forth on Instagram throughout the day. And then we also share meaningful memes that illustrate what we're talking about. And one popped up that was so on point. It read, quote, "I don't know who needs to hear this, but Isaiah chapter 60, verse 22 says, 'When the time is right, I, the Lord, will make it happen. So relax and trust God.'" And the handle of the account that posted the meme is Empress_empower. Instead of empower her. So Empress in her handle, I was like, of course, and that's the message we both needed to hear at that time. So that was a synchronicity. And then there are other things that came up, and my friend and I would just comment Empress, right? Just acknowledging it's the Empress archetype showing up for us to further embody, right? Because this is a shadow for me. And anytime you put that in your conscious awareness to draw in the synchronicities as we do, as we're doing in this process, it will bring in experiences to help you flesh that out and integrate that aspect. So I hope you're having amazing experiences too. But the most incredible and exciting synchronicity was that another close friend from New York City called me today, one of the friends that called me when I was like lonely, need a friend, he called me, and with amazing news that he'll be making his Broadway debut in March of 2020. And it's too soon to officially announce it, so I can't give him a proper shout out. But it's really exciting to me and synchronous for the Empress week, as she symbolizes success in the arts. And this is a long time coming for him. He has consistently worked. He is just always booking, always working. He's just made for the stage, you know? So I was so happy and excited to hear that news. I cried. He's just like, thank you for always supporting me and believing in me. And I've always called him my little star. So I'm excited for him. And to see him added to a lot of my amazing and successful friends. So that was just really, really great news. And it's interesting that he's not taking this journey with me, right? But I do believe as an empath, doing the work for myself can ripple out and affect the people I love and care about and am connected to energetically. I do believe that. So I believe anytime you take action to empower yourself, you're helping those you love too. I really believe that. So that was my experience with the Empress, right? Please share your experience with the Empress in the comments. How did she show up for you this week? Right? Did you have amazing experiences of getting in touch with your sensuality without guilt? Owning more of that for yourself, taking better care of your health, manifesting, attracting things in, magnetizing in the feminine approach, right? Success in the arts, what is it, right? What is it that we learned about the Empress? And now let's introduce the Emperor. So we learned, like I said in the beginning, we learned the history of the Emperor last week. In combination with the Empress, they were married couples. So, the story goes hand in hand, right? So, and hopefully you have the deck so that you can look closely at the cards. So let's talk about, the Empress and the Emperor history are so intertwined because they're a married couple. So check out last week's video if you really want to know the history. And hopefully you're watching this in sequence. But I mean, you're welcome to follow any way you like. So with the Waite-Smith symbolism of the Emperor, in the Golden Dawn correspondences, the Emperor is linked to Aries, the sign of the ram. And we find 4 ram's heads carved on his stone chair and 1 on his shoulder. So you see on the arms, on the top, and then on his shoulder, might not focus properly. So hopefully you have the deck and can look closely at the Emperor card. There we go. The ram's head on his shoulder. The Emperor is armored under his robe. Iron and the color red that dominates the landscape in the Emperor's clothes are linked to Mars, the ruler of Aries. The martial Emperor sits on a cold throne in an arid, rocky landscape. He is the complement to the Empress. Whereas she is sensual, he is ascetic. She is comfortable and he is disciplined. Alchemically, he is the red king and she is the white queen. In his hands are the symbols of his office, the feminine orb and the masculine mace. So he's holding the orb in his right and the mace in his left hand. But his mace is an ankh, the Egyptian emblem of life. His is designed to illustrate that the ankh is composed of the first and last letters of Tarot. T-A-R-O is the spelling that they're using here. So see, there's a T and an O there on his mace. And so that is the Waite-Smith symbolism. And for divination of the Emperor card, this is a card of power that comes from self-control. It may also represent someone in authority. So we might find that coming up this week. The Emperor is the creator of his own destiny. 3D divine masculine, right? As opposed to the Hierophant, which is the 5D aspect of the masculine in divine partnership, right? With a masculine and feminine energy. He's in his power. He has order and control. He's a husband and father. The zodiac sign of Aries, nurturer. Owning his own power, logical, mental and environmental order, perfect partner and counterpart to Empress, masculine man. Male power and all the ways it may manifest. Male leaders, patriarchy, sometimes wise and loving, sometimes cold and warped. The need to pursue that which is not in his possession. The use and manipulation of all else to help achieve his own ends. His sense of identity is associated with his rank and rule. He gives a lot but may expect in return. Strong, willful, giving, creative, knowledgeable, and deeply entrenched in the survival of his own being. Stability, power, aid, protection, a great person, conviction, reason. And I've also learned that the Emperor can represent a man who is all of the suits of the kings combined into one person. So he's fully empowered. So let's call in the Emperor now. Let's call in that information we just learned about the Emperor. Let's do some sound. So you might want to go inside with your breath, right? And attune to this energy, this essence of the archetype of the Emperor. As I play my frosted crystal singing bowl, and we send that vibration out, right? Out into the world, far and wide. So this archetype and synchronicities regarding the Emperor may return to us this week, right? Go ahead and go inside, close your eyes, get in touch with your breath. Focus on the Emperor. You might also want to use the sound here to fully integrate those experiences of the Empress, okay? Beautiful. Come back to the room. Now we've sent that essence and that energy of the archetype of the Emperor far and wide so that synchronicities can come to us this week. I'm excited to see how the Emperor shows up and to share that experience with you next week. Please do like this video so I know you're following along. Comment on your experience. I'd love to know how this is showing up for you in synchronicity and manifestation. Are you embodying these different aspects of yourself, or signs coming up for you? You know, which are shadow, which are light, right? Do you find that the Empress was something you easily attuned to? It's something you're consciously connected to internally. So it was easy to accept to and relate, or was it the opposite? It's a learning curve for you, right? That's how we know it's a shadow. So let's see how the Emperor shows up. Thank you for subscribing to the channel, and click the notification bell so you can tune into the premiere of these videos so we can watch together. And sharing this video and the videos on this channel with people who might be helped by this information and resonate and want to take this journey as well. Sending you much love. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Again, the Amazon store is linked in the description here if you want to purchase any items. It will be the list Journey Through the Tarot. And I'm wishing you much love, enlightenment, and incredible synchronicities this week. I'll see you in the next video, Empath.